Recently, I did a video where I examined comments from DDG, ex-boyfriend of Hailey Bailey, who basically explained why he believes relationships are like part-time jobs. And then I ran across this video of a popular content creator, influencer, and Nigerian feminist who explains why she thinks marriage is sex work. Before I break this down, let's hear what she has to say and then we can unpack it.
But what's really interesting about this conversation I was having regarding prostitution was this came off the back of me saying that the thing people don't want to recognize is, and this is going to be very controversial to say, but marriage also is sex work, because a lot of women, what they're doing is...
Okay, so obviously my initial gut reaction is that sounds literally insane. Now, before I explain why, I want to hear her argument to make sure I understand where she's going with this. Let's continue.
Yeah, and this is controversial to say.
Go on,
because
I'm going to hear this. Say this.
In your definition, where you said earlier about prostitution, where you know, like you sleep with a man, you get money, or you hang out with him, you get money. Why I say marriage is prostitution is because what happens is women engage in marriage from a place where, okay, he's gonna take care of you financially, and there's a home for you to live in. And what you are doing is you're fulfilling a role. So you're going to either be some sort of like homemaker, homekeeper, you're raising and rearing the kids, and you are partnering with him and sleeping with him in the hopes that the trade-off will be that you get validation, love, and upkeep. And the man understands and believes that if he continues to fulfill that role for you, then the arrangement works, because marriage is an arrangement. Now, why?
Okay, so she breaks it down. Basically, the way she's explaining it as marriage is something that's transactional, right? You do an arrangement, you provide these services, he provides those services, and then if it works out, then you guys remain married. So, and this is where I think we have to really step back and understand and define what we mean by marriage. I do believe there are two different kinds of marriages that are going on today. There are transactional marriages, as she mentioned, those who are no different than business agreements, such as the things that you see with Hollywood and some of the things that we see people do as far as transference of wealth, where it's really a political move. So there's that. And then there's a concept of covenant marriage, right? Which is actually something that God himself created between man and woman of God, which is not transactional at all. It's actually tied to purpose and destiny. You can't compare a relationship that is linked to purpose and legacy of a bloodline, of a generation. You can't compare that to sex work. One is completely transactional and it's all based upon what that person can do. Another one is connected to, you're literally connected to what you were placed on this earth for. And I think what happens is because a lot of people have seen relationships as transactional, and they look at these Hollywood, connections, these Hollywood relationships, these very broken down concepts of dating and mating and marriage. They think that's all it is. And I'm like, that's one version of it. But there's the other side, which is what actually God intended, which is this is your life partner and you guys together are building something that is far beyond, okay, did he pay the bills? Okay, did she look the part? It's far beyond that. It's linked to something much greater. I also find it interesting that this young woman has a lot to say about something she hasn't ever experienced. This is a woman who went viral, I think, years ago. And she spent a lot of her career really going against the idea of needing a man and needing a partner, of needing these old, quote unquote, patriarchal norms, and actually believes in dominating men. She calls herself I think it's a dominatrix, whatever that word is, but that's besides the point. This is a woman who, she's never actually been married. So it's interesting, she has a lot to say about something she hasn't experienced. And that leads me to believe that she's drawn these conclusions either from, media, from maybe different popular ideas or shows or ideas that are going on around in the culture, or maybe she herself has seen relationships in her family that she was not necessarily a fan of. But I want to make it clear that there are two different kinds of marriages. There are ones that she's mentioned where it's very transactional and it's very flat. And there's ones that I think are very much God-ordained and that are connected to a person's overall purpose. When you meet a life partner and you guys are building each other up in that sense, you guys are an asset to one another. Like I said, there is no way that can be compared to someone who simply offers an immediate service. There's literally no comparison. Let's continue.
It's prostitution is because whilst it's not necessarily on the surface, you're a transactional exchange, there's something that you're for.
So again, that's what I'm saying. So again, her conception of marriage is something that is transactional. That's the issue. If your idea of marriage is something that is transactional, then okay, of course you're going to say that. A person having sex for a couple amount of times or for whatever, that's different than now literally setting up a foundation for you to raise children, to teach them values, morals, and ethics that are going to actually help them parent the next generation. Completely different. There's zero comparison. The other problem I have with this is that not only are we looking at this transactionally, we're not talking about the intangibles. It's not just sex that a person gets in marriage that a prostitute can do. It's not just, okay, she even mentioned validation. Okay, that's on a lower level. But like I said, there are other intangible things that are available in a long-term marriage and relationship that you don't just get through sex work. Community, you can't necessarily fabricate community, like real genuine community within a family and then with a larger extended family. You can't fabricate that. You can't replicate that with the sex worker. Having a foundation to actually a stable foundation by which kids can be grown up emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, having that intact between a man and a woman who are committed to one another and who are building towards a purpose cannot be compared to a sex worker who's going and maybe doing and having sex with a person maybe X amount of time, but there's not that emotional exchange. And so already we're missing the larger intangible aspects of marriage, of being a wife, of being a husband, that I think a lot of people just don't really fully understand. Maybe they don't care to understand, or maybe they're just choosing to overlook. I don't know. But those things cannot be overlooked. Let's continue.
But then there's the basis of a relationship. I guess the reason why prostitution is because it's sexual. It's nothing but sex.
Yes.
So you get the sex, you go. Whereas a marriage, to even get to the marriage, there would have been a build of a relationship, friendship, gone through a few things, families involved. Maybe you might even have kids now.
Okay, so she's starting to speak a little bit more to the intangible aspects of marriage that are still very real and incredibly meaningful.
So I think that's why that would be the difference.
And why I'm fascinated by that is because what people really miss out on in that conversation and in their opposition to the idea of marriage being a form of sex work is once you stop being able to render that service to the man, he leaves you. So for example, I've seen countless situations where the woman has gained weight after having children and the man has decided he doesn't want to be with her anymore because either her libido has lowered, so she's no longer interested in having sex, she doesn't feel good about herself, she doesn't want to have sex, so that man moves on. Or the woman becomes disabled or becomes sick and needs long-term care from her husband, and he leaves because he can't be asked and he doesn't want to do that and he can't have sex with her anymore.
So my initial pushback is that women overwhelmingly initiate divorce. I want to say it's like 70% or around that, but the majority of divorces are initiated by women. I understand her theory, but her theory does not match the stats. They just simply do not. I'm not saying that there aren't men out there who leave. I'm sure they are. But in most instances, it's actually women. It's actually women who are choosing to exit their marriages and their commitments a lot more than men. So what she said, it does not line up to the facts. That's why I think her whole argument is it falls flat.
So what I've observed is that once men stop seeing you as the person that can fulfill that transactional need that they want from you, their energy switches up very quickly.
Do you think that's the case majority of the time?
So that was just a clip. There is a longer video, I think, which is about an hour or so. If you want to check it out, I've linked it down in the description. Honestly, the reason I wanted to go over this is because she reflects a modern idea out there among women, especially among feminists, that marriage is, it's patriarchal, that it's backdated, that it's oppressive, that it's transactional. Like, there's all these attacks against marriage in the day. I just wish that some people would come out and say, look, I'm attacking marriage because either I don't think I ever am going to qualify for marriage, or I'm afraid of marriage, or whatever. But a lot of the attacks that I see, to me, I don't think are really, they're not coming from a good faith perspective. She's a person, she's a open feminist. They said she's patriarchy's, I think, worst nightmare in a recent post that she did. So obviously she's gonna have her opinion, and that's her opinion. But at the end of the day, something that God established from the beginning of time is never going to be purposeless. It is never going to be useless. I don't care what culture says. I don't care how people are supposedly trying to evolve and say that it's patriarchal. I don't care. Something that God established since the beginning of time is never, ever, ever going to lose its intended purpose. Now, as I mentioned, there are people today who get in relationships and get in marriages that are not God-ordained covenant marriages. They're just hot messes. They're transactions. They are business agreements. So I do think there needs to be a distinction, because there is a distinction. But like I said, if a person is marrying someone that they know is connected to their long-term purpose and vision and goal, that is so much more powerful, and that cannot be complained that cannot be minimized to just simply sex work. That's just insane. But as I mentioned before, I think a lot of people are, quite frankly, unaware. Maybe they're not privy to, maybe they haven't seen those kind of marriages, and so they may be disillusioned and they don't think that it exists. But let me be one to tell you here that they absolutely do. And don't let someone sit here and lie to you, pretend that you are better off just being a sex worker, you're better off just sleeping around because marriage doesn't matter anyways. Don't let them lie to you. Marriage can be one of the most beautiful things, one of the most beautiful experiences that a person can have, one of the most refining, one of the most purifying experiences out there. And if it's something that God blesses you with, it's something you don't want to turn away, because it will be tied and linked to your destiny. And not only you, but the long-term destiny of your family and your lineage. But if you're simply thinking about yourself and simply thinking about what you can get in the moment, you're not going to look at it that way. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know. Leave your questions, comments, concerns down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening, if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later. Bye.